Hi, I'm Yusuke and I am a developer working on aep.dev. And today I'm here to talk to you about the AEP specification. There's other videos in this YouTube channel that have talked about other parts of the AEPs, such as the clients and the overall overview of what the project is and our goals. But today I'm here to talk to you about the specification specifically and the additions and what those are. Here's a quick overview of the video. We're gonna first navigate the aep.dev homepage, and then we're going to talk about additions and what those are, going into specifics about the AEP 2026 specification itself and some of the details in there, such as resources, methods, and our advanced design guidance that really kind of goes beyond REST. And finally, we're gonna run through a brief example of a resource-oriented API, how we designed that, and some of the steps there. So let's talk about aep.dev and the homepage and the apes themselves. So here you're looking at the homepage, and there's a bunch of links that will help you navigate to various aspects of the project, like their history, the clients, and so on. But we're going to explore the ape specifically, so we're going to click that. What you'll see here is the APs are organized as individual 1 to 2 page guidance that combines to create a collective specification. The idea is that none of the guidance is really optional as far as working with the clients and the ecosystem that we produce, but it's also individual guidance that might be helpful to an organization if you want to just basically go ahead and look at those. But at the top here, you'll see that there's some high-level organization about the project and how it works, and in particular, we'll dive into our discussion around additions. So this particular ape, aep-300, talks about our versioning scheme. So we adopted a edition-based versioning scheme, which is similar to a programming language like C++ or Rust. The idea is that every couple of years, we will evolve the specification. And across those editions, once one is published, it is frozen in that point in time, and there will be no breaking changes introduced within that particular edition. There may be changes that could be considered breaking across 2 different editions, but we are also taking great care to make sure that we minimize those types of breaking changes as well. The first-party ecosystem also has some guarantees around their support for specific editions. That's precisely one of the intentions of having this edition-based versioning, is that we can align on strict standard guidance that doesn't change over time so that producers can build against that specification and consumers can consume APIs that adhere to that. In terms of first-party tooling, we support up to 3 of the latest editions of the AEP specification, which effectively combined with our proposed 2-year cadence results in roughly 6 years of support at minimum for a particular edition. More realistically, we may extend that as well, because at the end of the day, we are trying to minimize these breaking changes, so even partial support might exist for much longer periods of time. Also here on the left, you'll see there is a left-hand navigation which groups the guidance into individual sections. And it's a great way to dive into the specification itself. So as a brief overview, APs are resource-oriented. So the idea is that we will produce an API that expresses the concepts of various objects, such as books, bookshelves, stores, people. A cloud may expose things like virtual machines or storage, and APIs are ways to interact with those specific resources and maybe also connect them together as well. So resources, the relationships with each other, and then these objects or resources have a set of standardized methods that look very similar for any particular operation. So a create for a bookshelf versus a create for a user versus a create for a virtual machine may look very similar, with the exception, of course, of the resource itself and the contents there. We provide standardized guidance for custom methods as well, but for the standard methods, we support create, read, update, delete, list as well, the whole CRUD plus L set of standard methods that you'll probably see in a REST API. We also try our best to align with existing guidance as much as possible, so there is a lot of care taken to align with IETF RFCs like 9110. And we try to provide this opinionated layer on top of what is a more agnostic, standard agnostic open API schema. So the guidance goes all the way, kind of from the beginning, explaining resource-oriented design, aep-121, how a API author may model the resources, how they kind of think about APIs overall. We have specific guidance around paths or resource associations as well. And then if we go into things like methods, you'll see that we have aep-130, which describes the types of operations you might want to perform on a particular resource and how we categorize them in the context of the AEPs. I've already talked a lot about standard methods like create, read, update, delete, and list. There's also a custom method category for basically the kitchen sink of the operations that don't really fit into that standard lifecycle. Things like moving a VM from one region to another, potentially restarting a VM as well. You may want to publish a book or unpublish it. These are things that you may want to express as a custom method instead of a standard method. If we go into standard methods specifically, like create, you'll see that we have very specific guidance on the types of fields that should be supported, how the resource maps to the actual JSON or HTTP payload, as well as things that we would expect to see in the response. It's tied to more general guidance like 193 errors, which describes guidance for all of the APIs that we expose. And combined, we provide this really standardized method around how the APIs are described and how a client would interact with them. Custom methods are a little bit looser. They, by definition, are a little bit more custom, and so we provide a little bit lighter guidance on the types of methods that will be supported, some standardization around how they would be expressed in the pathing structure so that an API user as well as a client can reason about them. So we've talked a lot about the methods that adhere to standard REST design and guidance, but there's a layer above that the AEPs also provide. For example, there isn't a lot of guidance or standardization around long-running operations, and so we have been inspired by other projects such as aep.dev, and they aggregated them together to produce our own guidance as well. So this provides a layer of design patterns that we found are very common, but don't really kind of fit into just the sort of REST minimal set bucket. Things like how pagination works, how filtering works. We have design guidance around resource revisions, how the soft delete pattern should be expressed. And so we found that having that additional layer helps remove some of the colloquially, what we call bike shedding around these patterns. And again, creates that standardized experience for a client or a user to reason about. So now let's talk about the AEPs in practice. We're going to walk through a toy example and go through the design process together. So let's say that you are trying to build a used bookstore website. The first thing you might want to do is think about how you model the data. And in particular, again, that comes down to resource-oriented design. In our model, we may have an inventory. Those inventories may be attached to a particular store. There's publishers that are attached to the book. And so the first thing you want to do is really kind of model these resources and their relationships and enumerate the methods that are available to every single one. You'll see here that we also think a little bit about the pathing structure. Those relationships between the resources, such as a parent-child relationship between a store and an individual item, for example, may be codified. And there's specific guidance around the AEPs to ensure that they adhere to our specification. But it's good to enumerate them in this example regardless. Once you kind of have that, there is this part where you have to author your API and create a specification yourself. So when we talk about authoring your API, currently the apes are not very opinionated in your language or your framework of choice. This is intentional. As a producer of your API, oftentimes there are constraints or design sort of like desired attributes that frankly the ape may not be able to handle in its entirety. You may want to use a very specific Node framework or Go or Python because that is what a lot of the code of your organization is already written in. You may have a blessed framework. You may be integrating into an API platform that is run by your organization as well. So for all of those reasons, the AEPs primarily focus on this interface that your API should produce, and then we produce these clients that can work with them. The only requirement really is that you document your API, and your API expresses the standard methods in the same way that we expect them in the specification. So really this comes down to just having some way to produce OpenAPI or protobuf if you're supporting that variant of the AEPs. For those who really want to dive in and kind of have a more tangible example to work with, we provide this project, aep.c. So you'll see that within aep-dev/aep.c. This is a toy service that expresses and produces a resource-oriented ape-compliant API. You'll see here we have in our example directory things like the OpenAPI definition itself, so you can take a look and have a good sense of sort of what an ape-compliant API looks like. A lot of this guidance is already collected inside of the apes themselves, as well as these examples. So you don't need to go to this particular project to actually get a sense of how the apes work. But again, if you are looking for that visceral example, you might want to look at that and other things within that example directory where we have a Go service that does things like pagination, expresses some amount of filtering, also grabs the list, create, read, update, delete APIs as well. So the apes don't provide a lot in terms of the API production tooling itself, but in terms of the linting and validation tooling, that's kind of where we step in again. So we have linting projects that verify a specification that is produced for your API in OpenAPI or Proto, and we are able to validate those schemas and provide you actionable feedback on what may be OpenAPI or ape non-compliant. So that's it. I hope this guidance was helpful. For the next steps, we recommend going to the aep.dev website yourself and checking out a lot of the guidance, reading through it. There is a whole tooling ecosystem and clients that are available, and there's other videos on this channel that can walk you through the various clients that we've produced, as well as some of the linting tooling. And if you want, you can always join us in the Slack channel, as well as in our mailing lists or our regular meetings. And there's plenty of areas if you want to get your hands dirty and start contributing. We have plenty of work around improving our generation tooling, trying to work towards maybe a place where the producers can leverage ape tools to some extent, writing clients, improving API design guidance, and lots of smaller improvements in documentation fixing. We accept any and all contributions. Thank you very much.